Have to hit OK. Okay.
Okay.
So as I said, uh, we have David Fugit with us today. He really needs no introduction. We know him well. We've had him visit with us before. We're super excited about that. Now, many of us write about homicide detectives. David is the real thing. Okay. So we have an opportunity to really, hear from someone who does it, in real life. And David is a longtime veteran of the Austin Police Department, over 28 years. He started off as a patrol officer, right there at the ground level. He did that for 4.5 years before becoming a detective. He worked for a while in juvenile missing persons. He worked for a while on the family violence protection team, and then he became a homicide detective. He was a homicide detective for over 19 years. And then David retired from APD in October of 2022. He now works for the Prosecution Assistance Unit as part of the Texas Attorney General's office, as I understand it. And David can tell us more about that if it makes sense. They provide assistance to local jurisdictions who could use a little help. And you can imagine out in rural counties, they could use some additional resource. And so they're there to help jurisdictions that could use it in terms of investigating and prosecuting complex cases. David has many certifications and awards. Just to name a couple, APD Unit of the Year for 2021. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Award by the Austin City Council in 2023. So without further ado, let me turn it over to David Fugit. Thank you very much, David.
Yeah, thank you, Pat. I greatly appreciate it. And just to talk on, touch base on the Attorney General's office, I transitioned from working homicides at the Austin Police Department. Now I work in the capital murder team at the Office of the Attorney General, where I work on cases in which the state is seeking the death penalty. And that's what I do exclusively now. And I do that throughout the state. So I've got cases in Del Rio, all the way out to Houston and up north to Eastland that we're working on. Today, we're going to focus on the Austin serial bomber case that I assisted with back in March of 2018. From March 2nd to March 21st of 2018, we had a series of 6 bombs that were either exploded in Austin or were destined for Austin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through each one of those scenes and show you how we ended up putting it together and identifying the bomber in the very end. This is very informal. This is for you. If you have questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to, raise your hand or yell out that to me. If I'm low volume, please let me know, and I'll try to speak up without yelling at you. But this is my splash screen here, and the reason I point this out because you can see that the return address on there is the address of Kelly Kilmore, and that's actually the name that the bomber put on each one of these packages that were sent out during this time frame. And hopefully my clicker will work. There are some photos in here with a little bit of blood. I try not to include anything that was particularly graphic. And if there were any, I try to blur them out. So I don't think there's anything in there that's going to cause you to be queasy or anything else. But just to give you an overview, I'm going to talk a little bit about the investigation, how we identified the bomber, executing the search warrant on his residence and items that we found, and then talk a little bit about the post-death investigation that was conducted. Obviously, this was a massive investigation. This included over 600 federal agents. Wow. So we had 12 detectives with the Austin Police Department, and we were responsible for the investigation as a whole, since it occurred within our jurisdiction. But we also had 600 federal FBI agents come in, and we had 80 ATF agents that assisted us with this. So by all means, this wasn't an individual effort. And I'm just going to point out some of the key players. So we have FBI agent Christopher Combs, he's retired now. He came in out of the San Antonio office. He was one of the agents in charge. Justin Wilson with the FBI. Fred Milanowski with the ATF. We also counted on U.S. Attorney John Bash. He did a lot of our legal work for us, drafting the search warrants that we used, as well as the pen traps and other things we used to track the bomber's cell phone. APD Chief Brian Manley was our chief at the time, and he was kind of the face of our investigation. FBI crime analyst Jordana Nesvog. She's very key. I'll show you where she came into play. And then APD homicide detective Rolando Ramirez ended up being the case agent for the Austin Police Department. He was actually assigned to the very first bombing that occurred, and then he stayed on as the lead investigator, and everybody else in the unit helped out, just depending on how complex that particular scene was. To give you a general overview of where these occurred at in Austin, I told you there were 6 in total. The vast majority of them were just east of I-35. We have 1 west of I-35, and then we had another one that exploded at a FedEx facility in Schertz, just north of San Antonio. So the first package bombing we had was on March 2nd of 2018. It's about 6:55 in the morning. Anthony House went out, saw that there was a package on the front stoop of his doorstep, and he picked it up, and when he did, it self-initiated this bomb, and it exploded right then and there in the threshold. As you can see, we've got quite a bit of blood. This is actually where the bomb exploded. Now, in this particular case, the threshold of his house is kind of inset. So he actually has a brick wall here, and then he has a wall here. So everything, for the most part, was contained just within that general area. You can see that we had quite a large blast that not only happened there on the doorstep, but also went into the residence. We had some pieces of shrapnel that went into the drywall inside. This is Anthony Stephen House. He was 39 years old. He ended up dying as a result of that bomb blast. There's another picture from the driveway. Again, you can see that for the most part, all the debris we have is contained just within that threshold area. But all the pieces that you see here on the wall, pieces of pipe that are impaled in the wall, you can imagine how devastating that bomb was. Pipe bomb? It was a pipe bomb that was used. We didn't know that at the time, but we later learned. So when he was taken to the hospital, they had him on the gurney, and as they're taking his clothes off, we saw that he had pieces of shrapnel that were impaled in his body as well, in his hand, in his foot, and there were pieces of sheet metal screws, nails, pieces of the galvanized pipe. Here you can even see there's one of the nails on the floor that came out of the pipe bomb that was tucked within his clothing. And now this is the bed sheet on the gurney where he was at, and you can see now there's a blood stain, but we have pieces of the cardboard box that accompanied him when his body was taken to the hospital. And it ended up being key later on because we collected every single one of these pieces of evidence to try to establish who was responsible for detonating that bomb. And then here's some pieces of his clothing. Again, you can see that we have cutting and sharp defects within his clothes, within his pants, and then on his shoe, where a nail ended up going through his shoe. This is just inside the doorway. You can see we've got debris there just inside the door. Again, I'm pointing out some of the sheet metal screws. And these ended up being components that were inside the pipe bomb itself. And then in the drywall, you can see where some of the debris had embedded as well. This is from the dining room area looking back out towards the front door. And you can see a couple of the agents out there where they're processing some of that evidence. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'd worked some pipe bomb detonations in the past, but they've been accidental, or somebody's taken a pipe bomb, try to throw it out into an empty field and it exploded and ended up dying as a result. But this is the first one I ever had where somebody had intentionally placed a bomb to cause somebody's death.
Excuse me, David.
Yes.
I think I may have read too quickly, that it was not delivered by UPS or APS.
That's correct.
So was it hand delivered by the bomber?
Hand delivered, yes. Sorry, thank you for pointing that out.
And he was targeted, this young man was
That's
targeted.
what we were trying to determine. So we found out they didn't have any type of stamping on to indicate that it was FedEx, UPS, USPS. Somebody had intentionally placed this box on that doorstep, and it was configured in such a way that once it was pickled up and it jostled, that caused the bomb to detonate.
Isn't that a huge risk because the placer could have joggled the
Yeah, so
bomb?
he did it in the way that he did it. I can't get into real specific details of how they were done because some of that is classified.
Oh, okay, okay.
But he did create contraptions within the box so that if it were to be moved by another individual, it would cause it to basically make that connection. I'm going to show you in a moment. We found some wires and some batteries that he used. And once those wires came into contact with one another, that caused the bomb to detonate. And I'm just going to show you some generics, but we do have actual photos of the actual components. But again, as I said, those are classified. But we had pieces of the box. We had some of the sheet metal screws. And the thing with the sheet metal screws, they had particular head stamp on it. And it wasn't any that we were we had recognized. Later on, when we brought the FBI in and the ATF, we had them go out to brick and mortar stores in the area to try to determine where did these come from. It wasn't until later on in the investigation we were able to establish that the bomber himself had a connection to a garage door business. And those sheet metal screws were used in that particular business, but they couldn't be purchased from the store. But again, early on, we did not know that. So just as with any homicide case, you don't necessarily know that you have a serial killer until you have another instance. And this is a case where we had the first one on March 2nd, span of 10 days had passed now, and we have another bomb. And this one went off on March 12th at 6:44 a.m. And I actually have audio with this one that I'm going to play for you. This occurred on Old Fort. I'll try to play for you. See here. Why it's not playing.
Let me see if I can do it.
I could try. I don't know why it's not giving me the drop down for it. So this is the mother of Draylen Mason calls in 911. She's hysterical. She says, there's a bomb. This is a bomb. This is an explosion. There's an explosion that just went off. I don't know what happened. My son's been hit.
Oh, here.
Okay.
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
you gonna,
You can turn, yeah.
back and then forward again so we can.
If you can turn it up as well so they can hear it.
Police fire EMS? Oh, I need a EMS, please. Okay, hold on. I know I'm down my head. Something exploded. Okay, you want the address? Oh my God, this man was driving. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. What's the address? 1-800-604 the address. Is this a house, apartment, or duplex? It's a house. What phone number you're calling from? Yeah. What's the phone number you're calling from? I can't understand you. Okay. If we get disconnected, I'll need you to call me back. Tell me what happened. Something exploded in the house. And my grandson is bleeding everywhere.
So when that first one happened on the 2nd, Anthony House was killed. I told you we didn't know that we were going to have a serial bomber at that particular point in time. So we're trying to determine, you'd ask the question, was he targeted? And we didn't know. We ended up executing a search warrant at a house. We went through, we found some evidence of some possible identity theft. We think, well, maybe somebody had it out for him. We also talked to our narcotics unit, and they had indicated just a couple of weeks prior that they had executed a narcotic search warrant at a house just down the street, on the same street that he lived on. And that house was very similar in appearance. So we're thinking, well, this is maybe a case of mistaken identity where they were trying to send the bomb to that particular house and put it on Anthony House's porch instead. So that's what we were working on up to this point. Now that we've got this second explosion takes place, 17-year-old Draylen Mason is African-American as well. And now we're wondering, okay, we've got both victims in these cases are African-American. Is this particularly a hate crime? Does it have to do with their race? And that's when we looked at bringing in the FBI. So the FBI will look at cases where you have incidents of terrorism, civil rights violations, hate crimes. So we asked them to come in and kind of help us to see if there's any way that we can tie these two together. We also brought in the ATF because they specialize in dealing with explosions. So the FBI agreed to help with doing the background research and the ATF with processing the evidence in this case. And as this progresses, we actually had 2 dedicated planes where we were able to take evidence from Austin up to DC twice a day. So we were constantly flying evidence from here to their lab. And thankfully we did, because we obviously don't have those types of resources in Austin. Now this is purely speculation on my part. But I told you how that first bomb, when it exploded, it occurred within that threshold and everything was pretty well contained. I think that when this address was targeted, it was done because they had a Ring door cam. And the individual was wanting it to capture the devastation when that box was picked up. So what happened is when Draylen Mason steps out, he sees the package on the doorstep, picks it up and takes it inside the house, and he puts it on the kitchen table. And he makes a comment to his mom, "This looks awfully suspicious. It doesn't have any type of tags on it. It doesn't say where it's from." And she proceeds to open it up. And when she does, Draylen Mason ends up catching the blast and then ends up killing him. And he died. His mother sustained some pretty significant shrapnel injuries as well, but she survived, and she has since recovered.
I have another question.
Yes, ma'am.
Had it already, and I was around at this time, but I don't remember everything. Had it already made the news about the first bomb? Is that why perhaps?
Not as significant as it did after this. So the first one, we didn't know if it was just going to be an isolated incident. But after this happened, then we hit the media hard.
Okay.
Because we were now concerned, okay, we've got 2 bombs that seem to be somewhat indiscriminately placed. And we don't know if there's any others at this point. And obviously what's going through our minds is the Unabomber. You know, it went on for 18 plus years. We're thinking we're going to be dealing with this now for the next, century. Who knows? So we brought in all the resources, and thankfully they came on board very, very quickly. Now, we did look at the ring cam video to determine, okay, well, it's great. We got video now of them placing the bomb, but it didn't pick anybody up. So actually what it did was it went back behind the bushes and then just pushed it up into what was on the front porch. Because we did find some muddy shoe prints back behind the bushes, but we don't see anybody on video at all. But again, I said it's just speculation. I think that he placed it there because he wanted it to be caught. But he still ended up picking it up, taking it inside before it detonated. There's a 17-year-old Draylen Mason. We looked at his background as well, determined if he had any reason to have somebody want to hurt him or cause him harm, and nothing. This kid was just an outstanding student. He was a music prodigy. He ended up getting a scholarship to a very prominent school, which he didn't learn about. His mother ended up getting the acceptance letter, I think a couple of weeks after his death. There was no indication whatsoever why somebody would want to cause him harm. And as I said, now we've got 2 African-American males end up being the victim in this particular case. So once this came out, then we hit the press. We had Brian Manley get in front of the camera and say, "Hey, we've got 2 explosions out here. We don't know why they were selected, and we don't know if there's any others out there, but there is a reason for the community to be concerned." And we also asked people, if you see any suspicious packages or anything like that on the porch, don't touch it. Call the bomb squad. In this 1 week period alone, we had over 700 calls of packages. So anybody that got an Amazon package or UPS, they were getting called, "Hey, there's a package on my neighbor's doorstep," and we went to go check it out. And during these homicides, we always try to look for a silver lining if there is to be one in these homicide cases. And if there is one in this particular case, is that porch pirate thefts were an all-time low in Austin. People were not stealing packages. Was just an issue we got to deal with today, but then that was not happening. People were pretty astute, and they were calling in. So this is inside Drayler Mason's house. I told you he placed it on the dining room table, and that blast went off, and it literally just rocked the entire house. You can see it blew the cabinet to pieces and took them off their hinges.
What were they using for explosive?
This one again was another pipe bomb.
No, what was the explosive agent?
The Imodium, the same thing that was used in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ammonium nitrate.
Ammonium nitrate. Yeah, we ended up finding over 100 pounds of it in his house.
Wow.
Yeah. So this, the cardboard, you can see a piece of it in the chandelier. And that's where we end up actually having some of the writing from the Kelly Kilmore that we were able to later trace. But you
Didn't he
can
live
s-
with his parents?
What's that?
Wasn't he a young person who lived with his parents?
Yeah,
The
he did. He
Taylor?
just moved out, had just recently moved
Oh,
out.
okay.
Yeah. And he was self-proclaimed atheist. His parents were pretty religious.
Hmm.
Yeah, it was really kind of an odd scenario.
I was thinking of the 100 pounds of ammonium nitrate at his, at his parents' house. Like,
No,
how do you
no,
not
yeah,
notice that?
yeah, he had just moved
Okay.
out. I'll talk about it. I'm gonna show you some pictures of
Oh,
his
you do?
house. Yeah, I'll show you some pictures of his house. So he lived with 2 other roommates at that
Okay.
particular time. But you can see just the devastation was just massive. I mean, that's what's left of the kitchen after it went off. And the dining room table is just off to the left there. And again, we laid out tarp and went through and started collecting up all these components that were part of this. And again, these are just obviously generics, but what was key was the type of batteries that were used, very, very particular, and they can only be purchased from one place in Austin, and that was at Fry's Electronics off of Milpitas Boulevard. And that ended up being key later on into establishing his identity. So again, Brian Manley went out there. He met with the behavioral unit at the FBI, and they're trying to determine what the profile would be of an individual that would do something like this. And they actually crafted a statement where Brian Manley got in front of the camera and was basically speaking through the media directly to the bomber to say, hey, obviously we recognize what you've done, but we don't know why. There's a particular message that you're trying to send to us. So later that day, this is the same day now as that one, just a couple hours later, we had the 3rd package, and this one exploded on Galindo Street. And I actually was responsible for working this particular scene. And this is where 75-year-old Esme Barrera had picked up a package on her front step. Now, the package that she picked up was addressed to the house across the street. So he is definitely now trying to terrorize the community by having this detonate outside, which it did. So you see 2nd and 2 book. Now this is the front stoop to her house. And I've got another 911. This is touch screen. Is that how you did last time?
Yes.
Okay, tell me exactly what happened. We don't know. We don't know what's wrong. My neighbors are outside on the ground.
That's pretty short. Yes. Yeah, that was the extent of it. So that was a neighbor that called in and said, hey, there's an explosion at the house. Again, this is just a few hours after the previous explosion had taken place. So I respond to this saying, when I arrived, they had just carted Barrera off to the hospital. So I ended up interviewing the EMS techs. Said, hey, did she say anything? Notice anything out of the ordinary? And it said that when they found her, she was right here at the front stoop, laying on the ground. She sustained some significant shrapnel injuries to her left leg. She ended up losing a finger in the end. But she was in such pain at that time, they said that all she did was just plead for God to take her. And she was ready to go. They ended up taking her to the hospital, and thankfully were able to save her leg. But she did lose a finger. This is obviously a photo that was taken afterwards, but she is recovering. She's a great grandmother of 8. Yes, ma'am.
You said that there were over 700 calls that came in with suspicious packages. Did any of those pan out to be a bomb?
No. The only other one we had that was an explosive device was at a Goodwill, and somebody had donated it in a box. It wasn't intentional, but it was I think an old military ordnance or something like that, grenade or something that was.
I remember that.
Yeah, it went to Goodwill. Of course, we shut it all down. Like, don't go anywhere near
Is
this
that
place.
from- It seems like it could be.
I don't think it was intentional.
Yeah.
Somebody was just clearing out
Yeah,
basically junk, and it ended up in this box. But it happened during the time frame of these other explosions. So when they saw it, they're like, whoa, this is not good. But the bomb squad went out there and they x-rayed it and they ended up collecting it, and it didn't turn out to be anything. It wasn't related in any way. So this is from the inside. I took these photos. You can see she's got the wrought iron gating across her front door, but you can see the glass and they just completely blew it out. Some pictures I took of the inside of the house. Again, you can see all the glass there from the explosion where it happened right there on the stoop. Again, just to reiterate, first one happened at threshold, is fairly well contained. The second one in front of the door cam, the ring, but he still carried it inside. This one, he addressed to the address right across the street. So his intention was definitely for it to go off outside and to create as much devastation as possible. I blurred this. There really wasn't anything that you'd be able to see, but each one of these orange flags, tents, are components from the bomb. Either screws, nails, galvanized pipe, pieces of cardboard that had been collected. There's a ladder. You see we got a ladder because we had debris up on top of the roof of the houses. We had debris underneath cars. I mean, it stretched all the way down the street for a couple hundred yards. And again, we were finding the same kind of components in each one of these with the sheet metal screws, the nails.
did the strength stay the same consistently, or did he amp it up?
They seemed to be pretty consistent
Okay.
with regards to the amount of damage that was done. So I think he had that down to a science. We did later on learn when we went and executed the search warrant at his house, he had bunch of old phones. And I think that at some point he was trying to figure out how to wire these up where he could set them off remotely. And he never really did get to that point, but I think that's what was going through his mind. We even had nails that had embedded in trees out in her front yard as a result of that explosion. I think this video is one of the dogs. Sorry, I didn't know it was going to play automatically, but I was going to explain to you. So we had debris out there in the street. And as I said, I wasn't very familiar with dealing with bombs. I didn't know necessarily what was going to be a component or not. So what I did was I took a can of orange spray paint and they had me go up and down the street, and every single item that I found out there just circled it in orange paint. And what we did was we ran these ballistic dogs through where they could pick up on the scent of the gunpowder, and they would go through and sniff each one. And if the dog detected it, they're taught to sit down. And that's what he did on this battery. You see, you got the battery right there. They teach them not to scratch or paw at it, because obviously if there's a bomb in his box, it could go off. So the dog just sits. And then we run a double blind. So we'll bring another dog through that hasn't been down that road yet and have them test everything. And we had 2 dogs that hit on the same item that we knew that was something that we were going to go ahead and collect. And that dog actually picked up on that battery when I was there. So I had him do it a second time so I could record it for training purposes. But he picked up on it and then dog sits down. As you can see, I did it all the way down the street.
Did you guys use the bomb dogs when you had people call in on packages?
Yes. Yeah, they send dogs up to the house. Later on, we had another one, and I'll get to it in a bit, that we found at another FedEx facility in Austin. It was unexploded. So we had the bomb squad go in there, and they were actually able to x-ray it in place. We could see how the components were wired together. So then we knew how they had been set up. So we did recover one that was intact. This is our command post for the Austin Police Department. It's basically a double wide that we can take out there. We parked it down the street and we used it for not only APD, but FBI and ATF. And this was kind of our main hub where all the information was being shared. Because we learned very on, you've got 12 of us, you've got 600 federal agents, there's information coming in from all these different sources. interviews. A lot of investigators are out there just gumshoeing it, going door to door, knocking, saying, "Hey, do you see anything? You hear anything suspicious?" We had others that were reviewing surveillance video footage from the different neighborhoods. And the nice thing about Ring, I don't know if anybody here's got one, I got one after this case, is that law enforcement has the ability to go in, log into the Ring portal, and I can create a geographic fence and say, okay, I'm interested in anybody that's got a Ring camera in this particular area, and I can send that out. And anybody that does, they receive it and they can send me video. So we were getting videos back within minutes.
Wow.
And I mean, it's a great, great tool. And we've used that on many cases. So yeah, if you need an idea for your for anything you're writing on, yeah. So we send it out, say, hey, anybody that lives in this geographical area, if you've got video, please send it to us. And they'll email each one of the owners of those so they can sign up to be part of that. So we had a lot of surveillance video footage to review. We were also going door to door and we were looking at people's routers. Just like at your house, when you walk into your house and your phone is connecting to your Wi-Fi in your house, or if you go to IHOP or whatever it may be, it may pick it up. So we were looking at their routers too, to determine if there's any particular number or ID that these routers picked up, and then comparing those to the other neighborhoods to see if there were any too. Unfortunately, he had switched up phones, so we weren't able to really tie those in together. We also did cell phone tower dumps. I know we all watch the same shows. Doing tower dumps in this particular neighborhood and then doing tower dumps in the other one to see if a particular phone is in this area as well as in that other area too. So we had a lot of things going on, but like, again, this is our kind of our central hub. So we had these papers out taped onto the side. I blurred them out because there are names and addresses and phone numbers on there. But we put every single address, 2 streets, 3 streets in each direction. And then we sent people out and they'd come back and they'd make notations whether this person was home at the time, saw or heard anything, along with their contact information. So we got everybody identified like right off the bat.
Was that a valuable piece of information to see which phone had been at this location at this time and then also at this location at this time? Like, was there a lot of crossover or was it, did it exclude a lot?
It excluded a lot, but you're talking about thousands of numbers over time.
Yeah.
Because we only had general window as to when these potentially could have been placed, you know. And say, well, I picked this package up at 6:55, but we don't know how long it had been there before they found it. So there was a lot of research to be done. And Jordana Nesvag is the FBI crime analyst. She's got a very technical mind. She is the one that started really putting these pieces together for us at the end. I'll show you here in just a moment. But that is a great question. So we had this noted at what time people had arrived home, whether they saw anything. It was particularly helpful too, because when we're looking at surveillance video footage from Google Nest cams and Ring cams, we could see people coming and going from the neighborhood, but we were able to identify those individuals by doing that neighborhood canvas. And we say, okay, that's not going to be related. And we could rule it out. So as of March 12th, we'd already had 3 bombs at that particular point in time. And based on the components and the way that they were constructed, we believed that they were all going to be as a result of the same individual or individuals. But we still didn't have any reason to believe that it was going to be a hate crime other than the victims in those 2 cases happened to be African-American.
What was the family across the street that had the address with the 3rd one? Were they Black males as well?
No, actually, I think that was a Hispanic family. Okay. Yeah. And she was, and Esme was Hispanic too.
Right.
So we put out, obviously we're seeking information, and we've gone very, very public at this point, pushing out as much as we had, because now we've got 3. And there's reason to believe, obviously he hasn't been caught yet, that there could be more. So we're asking for anybody's help. Now, 6 days later, we end up having the 4th bombing in Austin. And we did all those press conferences where we had Brian Manley basically speaking to the bombers saying, hey, we see you're putting these packages out. You know, what are you wanting to accomplish? Well, because of all the publicity that we had received, he changed up his message of delivery. So he went from placing the packages to now creating a tripwire. And this was particularly scary. This one happened in Southwest Austin. And this tripwire was connected to this sign. It says, "Drive like your kids live here."
Oh, God.
And there was a backpack. And we get the call. It's two Caucasian males are going to the park in the neighborhood. And as they're riding down the sidewalk, this tripwire goes off. And when the officers arrive on scene, let's see if I had a picture of it. So here's a picture of the sign, just a part of it. And then there was a backpack, and there was actually a monofilament, like a fishing line, clear fishing line that was drug out across the sidewalk. And it was about 2 inches off the ground. So if you're just walking along or riding along, not paying any attention, and you hit that tripwire, it went off. The scary thing was now is that it's indiscriminate. They weren't intentionally placed on somebody's porch. Now we've got potentially a 6-year-old kid that could be going to the park in this neighborhood and end up tripping on this thing and end up being killed as a result of this bomb. It's very, very scary now because now it's changed. So all those other cases where people were calling in and saying, "Hey, suspicious package on their porch," that's out the window now because now he's got a different mode of delivery. So we had the FBI help us with researching that particular sign, determine, hey, where can you buy this sign at? And so I started doing some research, and later on found out that Home Depot is the one that sells that particular sign. That's the only one in the area.
Was there any fingerprints or anything like that on the sign?
Oh, he was wearing gloves. He wore gloves
Oh,
a lot of times. I'm going to show you the FedEx video. I tell you, those are good questions. Yeah, those are very good questions. Yeah, he ended up using this sign, and he had basically attached the sign across the way, and then the other end was attached to the backpack. It was just kind of laid out in the grass. Piece of shrapnel that went through the fence. So this is one of the males. It was he and his buddy were going to the park on the bikes, and he ended up sustaining some pretty significant shrapnel to his legs and to his feet down below. He is recovering, but he still to this day has some nerve damage in his legs due to the lacerations and the burns. And
Can I ask you,
William Grove,
with that sign, did that make y'all think maybe he was targeting children?
it's very possible. And the fact that it was near the park.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very possible. Yeah.
And because at first I thought, well, the sign was already there, but then when you said he set it up.
He set it up. Yeah. That's one of the things when we're going through the neighborhoods to try to determine if it belonged to somebody in the neighborhood because it looked like the tripwire had been attached to it. And nobody came forward and said, "Oh yeah, I put that out there." So we were thinking it's going to definitely be a key piece of evidence. Every piece of that shrapnel from that sign we ended up collecting. Colton Mathis was the other individual, and he ended up obviously sustaining some shrapnel injuries to his legs and his feet as well. And it also had pretty significant nerve damage as a result of that. But he's also recovering and then groped. So you can see his legs are wrapped. So we went out there and we basically lined up shoulder to shoulder. And we walked down the street. And again, just like we did on the other one on Galindo, we were looking for any piece of potential evidence because you never know how small even the most minute piece of evidence could be that would help tie this together. So we walked down the street and they would tent anything that looked like it possibly could be bomb related. And then once we went down the street, then we came back and we lined up against the curb line and we walked across the street to where we were perpendicular. And we originally do that. It's just like when you're vacuuming the carpet in your house, you don't vacuum everything in the same direction. You kind of go side to side to make sure you don't miss anything. We do the same thing when we conduct our searches like this, indirect grid searches. You can see we're all lined up and going down the street, trying to find any pieces of this evidence. So now on March 20th, we get called that there's an explosion at a FedEx facility in Schertz, just north of San Antonio. That's a pretty good distance from Austin. And this one had been sent through the mail. So we got 3 that were intentionally placed on doorsteps, got the tripwire. Now we got bombs that are going through the mail. And so Schertz calls us, San Antonio PD calls us and says, hey, there's a bomb explosion at this FedEx facility. We shut the place down. We get out there. And they basically had these conveyor belts where these packages go down these conveyor belts. And then they have these large paddles, kind of just whack these packages, you know, based on, I guess, their destination. And when this paddle hit this package, it caused it to detonate. And it blew up. And thankfully, no one was injured in that. So we immediately sent FBI and ATF agents down there to that facility. And FedEx is able to track these packages down like a minute. And they were able to tell us this package was sent from FedEx facility on Brody Lane out of Austin, Texas. Immediately, we went to the FedEx facility in Austin. And the clerk was able to tell us that not only was that one sent, which was destined for Austin, which why it went to Schertz to come back to Austin, I have no idea. But they did. It was designated for a pastor that lives in Austin. So it got shipped from Brody, went to Schertz, and then it was going to come back to the pastor, but it exploded in transit. But they said that that was one of 2 packages. And there was another one that had went out to the FedEx facility out there by ABIA, by the airport. And it was in the process of being loaded onto a truck for delivery. So we contacted that FedEx facility and shut it down.
Do they have video cameras inside the FedEx facilities?
They do, but he did, and that's how we ended up getting our first video of him, is at the one on Brody Lane. So the other one is shut down. We go to the FedEx facility on Brody Lane, and there he is. This is when he's coming in the doors to mail those 2 packages. And I ended up interviewing the clerk that accepted those 2 packages. And he says the guy came in right around closing, just a few minutes before closing, came in and he's wearing these gloves with these pink rubber tips on them. And he said, and I noticed the guy was wearing a wig. You've heard the statement, keep Austin weird. So he told me, he said, you know, keep Austin weird. He said, the guy had a wig on, he's wearing his gloves, but hey, you know, didn't think anything of it at that particular time. Obviously now in hindsight, he knows what the purpose of that was for. But he's got kind of like a Sunday school church choir shirt on. It's got a little kid on a swing on it. He's got the blonde wig, and then he's got these gloves. And he takes them up and he places them up on the counter. And I told you, one was destined for the pastor in Austin. It ended up being sent to Schertz where it exploded. The other one was out there at the FedEx facility by ABIA. And that one was actually addressed to a supervisor at a med spa on 6th Street. And we're thinking, okay, now he's trying to target the entertainment district of Austin. I mean, you're going to hit downtown Austin, 6th Street. That's going to make some national, international news.
I'm sorry, what kind of business was it on 6th Street?
A spa.
Oh, just a...
It's a spa. But we're trying to figure out the name that he used for the supervisor, for the manager. That really wasn't the manager of the spa, but that person was listed as a manager online. So I don't think they even knew it was. He just picked an address on 6th Street to send it to. I don't know, do you guys frequent 6th Street? Yeah.
Officer, I had a really quick question.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the question is, so part of your team probably is trying to assemble the components of the bomb, you know, what type of bomb is being used and where this bomb is being sourced. Like, at what point did you actually, before you were able to verify the unexploded package, did you have a pretty good idea of the type of bomb and the components that were being used to build that bomb and where the plans were sourced?
Yeah, so at this particular point in time, we did recover pieces of galvanized pipe that had threaded heads on them. So we believe that they were, in fact, pipe bombs that were being used. We just didn't know how they were put together. Because we knew that he had these battery packs, particular brand of batteries that he was using along with the wires, so that they were victim initiated. When they were picked up and jostled, or if somebody tried to open the lid to the package, that would cause these 2 contacts of the wires to come together.
Did you have idea of where he learned to do this? Could he have learned this online, or was
Yeah,
this
so we did research that. So there are like anarchist cookbooks that you
correct?
can there's videos on YouTube, there's amateurs that are making, homemade pipe bombs. Another thing that concerned us too was around the same time that this was going on is that the Unabomber show was premiering on Netflix.
Ah,
I know that he ever watched it, but I was kind of wondering if that kind of spurred the idea for him to start doing this.
all
But
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
yes, sir.
fascinating.
Yeah. So now we've got this video, appears to be a Caucasian male. We can kind of get a general idea as to how tall he is and his build. So we had agents go out into the parking lot using the same video footage and having them walk in carrying 2 packages. And we knew what their height was, so we could compare it to the height of where he measured up on the door. And that would kind of just give us a general idea. So this clerk, when I brought this clerk in and I'm talking to him, that's me talking to him at the PD that day. He says, yeah, the guy came in, he's wearing the wig, he had his gloves on, he didn't really say much. He said, but it was right at closing, and I kind of watched him as he left. And he said, when he left, I noticed that he didn't park right out in front of the FedEx. He said he parked across the street by the Party City, and he left in a red Ford Ranger. Really? So we went to the Party City and we got video footage where we could actually see the red Ford Ranger truck that he got into. So now we've got this individual tied to a red pickup truck.
And that would be considered unusual behavior because why not park right in front of the shop?
Yeah, there was
that you're
ample
going
parking.
to?
And it was right at closing
Yeah.
too. There was ample parking out front. You
Yeah.
can even see when he comes in, there's nobody out front.
Yeah.
Especially if you're carrying boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You can see that
nobody out
it's
front.
in spot.
Yeah. He said he didn't see him come in from that direction, but he said when he left, he kind of watched him and he noticed that he parked way over there by the Party City. He's like, that was odd. So I ended up interviewing him at length. We had the agents while I'm interviewing him in real time are going to the Party City and they're obtaining surveillance video footage from the Party City. And they actually pull some still photos and end up sending them back to the PD so I could show them to him. And he's like, yeah, that's the truck. That looks just like the truck that he got into. There's a picture of the truck. And it also had some junk items in the bed of the truck too, which later ended up being fruitful because once we identified that truck and knew that it was parked at his house, we sent up fixed wing planes to fly overhead and they could see the same items in the bed of the truck. So we knew, okay, we've got our guy at this particular point in
Were
time.
you able to identify his tag from the video?
No,
Okay.
no, I sure wish.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately not. You know, we hear instances where the NASA can go in there and zoom in on license plates and no, we weren't able to. Just the angle of the plates
Yeah.
when they left. I know that some apartment complexes now are placing cameras at their entrance and exit gates down low so that they will capture them. But this one was just general. It was up high and it was at the wrong angle where
And
we
in
weren't able to
Texas,
see.
you have to have a front and back,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes, you do. Yeah.
So that's him.
So that is him. Yes, that is him. So the FBI agents now researching that sign went to the Home Depots. Well, it's the only place that sign could be purchased. Said, I want to know every single person that purchased that sign and these other items together, including the gloves. And they said, well, we've got this guy that ended up buying the gloves and this sign, but he paid cash. So we don't have a number or name on him yet. But when he leaves the Home Depot, he gets in the red Ford Ranger pickup truck. So this is one of the better pictures that we actually had of him at that particular point in time. But again, you can see the build is generally the same. So we start researching the components. I told you the batteries that were used and the components can only be bought at Fry's Electronics, Austin. So they started running all the purchases for those batteries and the battery packs and came across a handful. There's a number of different names, but one of them came back to this guy, Mark Anthony Condit, who used his card to purchase those items. Now, prior to this date, March 20th, he had not been identified. But when they go back and I look at the surveillance video footage, we say, that's the guy. It's the same guy now. So now we got him on video, Party City, at the Home Depot, and in the aisles at Fry's Electronics. So this is where Jordana Lesvig with FBI starts researching. Now we've got a name, Mark Anthony Condit. She starts comparing that name to all the registered owners of red Ford pickup Rangers in the Austin area. See if we can put the two together. And that's how she's ended up making that connection.
Once you identify, like, in this case, you only had one match, do you put them on 24-hour surveillance immediately?
We did. So once we identified him at this point, we're like, this is going to be our guy. Because we had several individuals that we were looking at during this time. People would call in and give us anonymous tips like, hey, this guy was in the military. He's got a background in explosives. No, I don't know that he's in any way involved, but you might want to check him out. So we probably had 30 or so different individuals that we were researching to try to determine if they were going to be, in fact, one and the same. And Mark didn't really have a background that we knew of, so he didn't really stick out that particular point in time until we were able to make the connection with the components being bought and the red Ford Ranger pickup truck. So once they identified him, started researching him and his family, and found out that he was living with some roommates up in the Pflugerville area. He'd moved out not long before. So we ended up getting a search and arrest warrant for Mark Anthony Condit at this point in time. Going through his social media to try to determine, is he somebody that's anti-government? Somebody tried to figure out why he would do something like this. The only connection we found between him and the pastor is that his mom had liked the Facebook page of the pastor. And that was it. We had no other connection to tie him into that, and nothing to tie him into Draylen Mason or Anthony House's residence. I told you components we picked up, like the sheet metal screws, we found out that couldn't be bought at brick and mortar stores. We had ties to a garage door company up in Cedar Park, and those were the type of sheet metal screws that they used for the installation on those garage doors.
Ties to, like, he installed garage doors as a living?
Mm-hmm. So now we've got all these little bits and pieces. We didn't know how significant they were going to be in the beginning, but now we've got sheet metal screws that are being used that can only be used at this garage door company. Batteries that can only be purchased from this place. A sign that can only be purchased from this place, and he's got ties to all of them. So we set up on his house, but we were concerned that his house, where he's living with his two roommates, were going to be booby trapped. So we were going to keep an eye on it. We got the search and arrest warrant, and we were going to go hit the house. So, as I told you, we thought potentially the house was booby trapped. So we contacted Austin Travis County EMS to have them on standby. Should we go up to the house and an agent end up being injured or something? We wanted to have medical care there. Austin County EMS showed up, and they went directly to the house and knocked on the door.
Oh, my.
They didn't know. We didn't have a chance to explain to them why we were wanting them out there. We just gave them the address. Now, I will tell you, it ended up being an absolute blessing in disguise. So we didn't know that Mark Anthony Condit was in the house. So EMS drives up to the house and knocks on the door. And the Asian roommate answers the door and says, hello? And EMS is saying, hey, is there something going on here? And said, no, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, oh, we got called out to this address. So he turns to the black male that lives with them and says, hey, did you call for EMS? And he says, no, it's just us. Anthony's not here. And then we knew that Anthony was not at the house at that particular point in time. Complete mistake. But it ended up working out to our benefit, because that's the only reason we found out that he wasn't there. So we were sitting up on the house, trying to figure out where he was at still. And we made a point. We'd been up for days on end. I've been sleeping in my office day in and day out. Up to this point in time, we're like, okay, we're going to hit it the next morning, regardless of whether he's there or not. So we're putting this game plan together. Condit's phone is silent. March 20th ended up being our daughter's 16th birthday. So I actually drove home. We had some cake. She opened up some of her presents. And then just within hours of that, I got the call that, hey, He's live on his phone. We're able to put him down. He's actually in a parking lot at a hotel up in the Round Rock area. I said, I'm on my way.
Did you ask the roommates to leave, or did?
No,
anybody tell them? It might be that.
We didn't know if they were involved. You know, that was the thing. They're like, okay, if they're living together, they might know. So we didn't want to tip them off.
Yeah.
We did see another couple go up to the house and ended up leaving. And we followed them and ended up being Jehovah's Witness. But we brought them into APD headquarters, like, why are you doing it? What are you doing at this house? You know, and yeah, we held on to them for a while until we were able to terminate. They had no clue what we were talking about. So we end up cutting them loose, but just behind the scenes. So we're set up on this house and we're kind of watching to see if he comes back to the house at this point. But we're pretty confident he's not there. We're going to hit it the next morning regardless. So I told you in early morning hours on the, that's what I talked about the FedEx, in early morning hours of the 21st, said, hey, he's in a vehicle. We've got him pinned down. We can see him. So we've got APD helicopter, DPS helicopter, and a fixed wing plane all up high. He doesn't know that we're watching him at this point, but they were able to ping his phone. And they get out there to the parking lot and they can see his truck and it's the engine. It's got a flare, so it picks up heat signature. They can see that he's been out there running his truck. We later learned that while he's sitting in his vehicle, he leaves like this 25-minute manifesto where he talks about every single one of the bombs, but he never really tells us why he did it. He essentially describes himself as being a sociopath. He says that I wish I could say I'm sorry, but I'm not. And then he talks about other plans, other things that he planned on doing, which we're not going to release. We never did end up putting that out because it's sensitive. So we start following him at this point. I'm at APD headquarters. I'm listening to it on the radio. They're trying to put a game plan together to do the takedown on him. He's in his vehicle. He's in this parking lot, this hotel, right off I-35 in Round Rock. And we're trying to get the Bearcats out there. The Bearcat, if you're familiar, is kind of like an armored vehicle. APD's got one, Williamson County Sheriff's Office has got one, and we're sending them both up there because what we're going to do is basically just pin him in. And they're kind of like tanks, basically like tanks. So if he's got a bomb or something that goes off, at least they'll be protected. Well, he starts moving before the Bearcats are able to get out there. So I'm going to show you the video footage of them following him in the takedown. Has anybody seen this before? Oh, you haven't? Okay, so I'm going to show you. I'm going to play this for you. I'm just going to let it play.
All right, got reverse light. He's backing out. All right, get a little closer. Lights are on.
This is a helicopter following me.
And it's 2:30 in the morning.
All right, come out. Somebody here.
First.
You ready to follow up, guys? I guess we got Air One.
Air One, he's moving out to Hoppy Trail. It's going to be southbound on Hoppy Trail.
Yeah, he's on the Hoppy Trail right now. Air signal on. He's going towards the 35 frontage.
He doesn't know that he's going to follow. Just
Put it up.
35 frontage now. Just headed southbound on the frontage. Left lane, southbound on the frontage. Approaching Old Settlers.
So our SWAT team is in an unmarked white van, and they're trying to catch up to him.
Stop at the light at Old Settlers in the frontage.
Yes.
Let's stay offset a little bit.
Yep,
that's fine.
So the red,
Like just a mile from my house.
All good.
yeah, the Red Ranger was at his house, so he's now using. I want to say it's maybe Richard to his dad. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys know, we're gonna try to do a visual. Okay. I'm staying on the frontage, headed southbound
He doesn't
on the
know it
frontage.
yet, but a SWAT behind him, but trying to catch up to him. Now they've been given the command, do not let him get on the interstate, because then it could be a high-speed pursuit. So they're trying. Yeah, he's coming up.
Well, the speed limit on that access road is like 60.
Yeah. You know where the hot tub place is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be just south of that.
Still south on the frontage, right lane.
Okay, now they're gonna try to catch him, because he's getting close to the entrance ramp.
Who's boxed in between two.
Yeah.
Right lane passages on Parkway
you
southbound
probably
on the
realize
frontage.
They're on him. And they can give command, do not let him get on the interstate. There's the hot tub place. Yep.
Okay, coming to a stop, coming to a stop.
Okay, just rammed him.
Rear
And SWAT, yeah, SWAT's gonna jump out now and run up on the passenger side of the vehicle.
1700 block of 35.
He just blew himself up.
Checking on it, 42.
When you interviewed him, they believed he was a sociopath as well? Like, did they?
They were completely beside themselves. They've been watching the news just like everybody else had, trying to figure out, man, why would somebody do this? No idea it was their son. I'll show you a picture when we go up to the house. So when they rammed him, he went into the culvert. The plan was for SWAT to run up on the driver's side, because they figured that would be the only safe side, because he had to get in and out of the vehicle through the driver's door. But when they hit him from the back and it went into the culvert, the driver's side wasn't available to them. So they ran up on the passenger side. Thank goodness they did.
Yeah.
Because he grabbed the pipe bomb and he held it to his chest and he self-detonated. If the SWAT officers had been at the driver's door, they'd have been killed.
Right.
No doubt about it. And I'll tell you that because I know there was a semi truck that was passing by just as that explosion went off, and he circled back and came back and I interviewed him. And there were actually pieces of shrapnel and blood on the semi truck. It was on the interstate. This is driving by at that particular moment in time. So they self-detonates, they back up. I'm at APD headquarters. I actually go out here to the scene, but we can't get close to the truck because we believe that it's probably booby-trapped at that point. So we were out there for like hours on end. And then we decided, you know what, we need to go notify his parents and start finding out what is going on. Well, the bad thing is that the media started showing up and they've got these cameras with this telephoto zoom lens. They zoomed in on the license plate on the truck and we're able to research it. By the time I got out to his family parents' house, the media was already camped out across the street. All the cameras were out there before we even got there. His family at this point is starting to put two and two together. Something is going on. So we try now in any of our homicides, we'll take the plates off or we'll try to cover them up right away so that they can't research them and then try to do their own investigation. So when I was talking to you, what's that?
They did it faster than you.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they did. They were on it.
Maybe you should hire them.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they were on it. So you can see the blast. Can you imagine if they were on the other side of this truck when that went off? So SWAT member Justinson went up there and you could see him in the driver's seat. And he actually used the barrel of his rifle to breach the glass and he fired a shot at the same time as he was self-detonating. But
Has
yeah.
that changed the protocol for approaching a vehicle, this incident? Like, did they change their?
I'm sure probably they probably have.
Yeah.
Nothing that I'm really privy to,
Oh.
and it's.
Did you all ever use the little robots that?
We did. So we've got video footage where we took the robot out there. So I told you we had to back off because we were afraid it's booby trapped. We actually sent the robot up to the truck.
Yeah.
And had them bust out all the windows and look inside with a camera. We also have robots too. So if we have individuals that are barricaded inside of a house that are armed, we've got a robot that we can actually put a shotgun on in front of the robot. We can have them go into the residence, you know, if need be.
Dallas did that, but they exploded something to take out the suspect
Did they?
with a robot. It was
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah. So we've done that before. And I think the instances that I worked on, the individual had already committed suicide. They'd already killed themselves. But had we not sent the robot in,
Yeah.
at least not right away. But I tell you, the SWAT guys, absolute heroes, you know, throwing themselves in that line of fire. Not unlike the Secret Service, you know, when they jumped on Trump, you know. I mean, it was a very dangerous situation. So here's a lot of the again, some of the main players that were involved doing the press conference after the explosion. And there's a picture of the truck. You know where it's at? Like I said, just south of the hot tub place, right before you get on. Yeah, here's the hot tub place right up here.
When he was discussing these bombs, was he talking to someone?
No.
Just talking.
Yeah, he was just talking. So he turned his phone on and he leaves like a 20, I think it's about 25 minutes long. And he just starts walking through each one. And he knew that he had screwed up in his comment, that he knew that when he went to the FedEx facility that we likely caught him on camera. And so he knew that we were catching up. We were catching up to him.
Did his roommates have any like suspicion?
Not that we could tie in. So when we interviewed his roommates, they said that he kind of kept to himself. They said he'd keep a padlock on his door. I'm gonna show you some of the items we found in his bedroom, but like
So they were strangers that decided to live together?
yeah, I don't know how they
No.
knew if they knew each other from school or not. That I don't remember offhand. But they were all about the same age.
Yeah.
And they said we'd sit on the couch and we'd watch the stories on the bombings together. And no idea that he's sitting here right next to us and he was the one that was doing it.
Yeah.
So you see where they took all the windows, busted all the windows out.
Nice explosion when the window jumps out.
Yeah,
It didn't take out the front window.
yeah, just yeah, cracked it. So there's a picture of me, FBI, ATF at the house. This is the parents' house. That's the parents' house. And this is how it was when I arrived. The media was already camped out there because they got his license plate, which I probably should have blurred it right there too, but they were able to track him down. So when I'm inside talking to the family, the sister got a notification on her Facebook from like national CBS News, wanting to know if she wanted to comment on it. This was just like within hours of this happening. I mean, they tracked him down fast. So this is video of us, myself and Rolando Ramirez, and we're getting ready to go through and do the search of Conant's residence. There's the truck that was parked out front. Again, we could see when we had the fixed wing plane up that we could see the same items in the bed of the truck that we could see on the footage from the Home Depot. Now, when we entered, we went in through the bedroom window, Conant's bedroom window, because the door was locked. We were afraid that it was going to get booby trapped. So they went in there and they cleared it for us. But inside of his bedroom, he had this big blue case and it had the disguises in it, the wigs, the glue guns, the wires, batteries, the gloves, everything that we found with him. The other thing that was scary about this too is he also had disguises in there. So he had like a construction helmet and a glow vest. So he could go into these neighborhoods like a water meter, going door to door. Nobody, none the wiser. Nobody would have thought anything about it. So he could get in there and get out. Nobody would have thought anything suspicious. I found some other wigs in his closet. We found 100 pounds of the, I told you, the Imodium. Yeah. And then we found all the phones. We found out that he had created, printed them on the printer, fake temporary tags. We found out where he was trying to make fake IDs under different names. So I don't know how long he planned on carrying this through, but he'd obviously put a lot of time and effort into it.
I was gonna ask how long, could you tell when he started gathering the items to, you know?
I don't, so we got his computers and wait for a second. So we got his computers and they were ended up having them where they were encrypted.
Oh.
And I don't know that the FBI was ever able to get into them. But he had obviously been researching this for a while because he had gained all those items. Gunpowder and everything else.
So it wasn't spur of the moment?
No, he'd been thinking this through for quite some time. And this is just an example of one of the pipes I found in one of the back rooms of the house. that's got the threaded pipe, same kind that he used in the pipe bombs. We also found that he was at the library, the public library, and he's got Deathpool is his screensaver on the back of his computer, but he looks directly at the camera at one point. We think this is where he was doing some of his research, or where he was following up and reading the stories about the bombs to see if we had released pictures of the truck or anything else that would lead to his identity.
Is that Round Rock?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was there any indication of bombs around the country that might have been fighting?
No, but I can tell you, so we had those two that we recovered, one that exploded at the Shirts FedEx facility, and then the other one we got from ABIA that was not exploded, and they were able to do x-rays of it, so you could see how he put these components together. But for several days after this, even after he had committed suicide, we were still concerned that there could be other packages out there somewhere. So even for several days after this, we were still very worried. You know, there could be other bombs out there until obviously some significant time had lapsed, and we didn't have any other issues. So again, as I told you, we had multiple persons that we were looking at. You know, military folks that had backgrounds in explosives that we were looking at. There's no way we could have done this without having the help from the federal partners, from the FBI and the ATF. At least not shutting this down in 19 days. You know, said, you know, the Unabomber went on for years and years and years on end. But when it comes down to the end, the question that we all still have to this day is why? Why did he do this? And he never really clued us in, not even on the manifesto that he left. He never really said why, other than he called himself a sociopath and said he wished he could say that he's sorry, but he's not.
And you said that he even had a black roommate and an Asian roommate,
Yes.
so kind of discounts his racially
Hatred.
profiling
Yeah,
somebody,
hatred.
so.
Yeah, so we don't know why those two addresses he ended up picking up on, but you can see all the rabbit trails you can go down, like Anthony House, control of the identity theft, and then we found out about the narcotics raid at the house that looks very similar to his. Mm-hmm. Those are all leads that had to be followed up on, and then we have Drayla Mason gets killed, again, another African-American male. Like, okay, is this going to be hate crime? And then we have Esmeralda, Hispanic female, but the package wasn't designated for her house. It was addressed to the house across the street. So we were moving in 1,000 different directions, and we were working around the clock.
And sometimes, I mean, if, you know, someone's, you know, brain isn't wired quite right, it's going to be hard to logically apply, you know, what makes sense.
Yes.
In your investigation, because they're randomly making choices.
That's probably the most difficult thing for me as a homicide detective, because I always want to get inside their head and try to figure out why did they do this. This isn't a rational person, you know, so you can't really think the same way that they do. And you know, we try to do our best to answer the questions that we can, but we don't always have the answers. And this one, we're all kind of scratching our heads as to why would he want to do this? I mean, said his parents are very religious. He was not. They would debate religion. But to go to that extent where you get the thrill out of killing somebody, and then now it's like potentially targeting children, you know, at the park with the tripwire. I mean, just no conscience.
And especially with no brushes with law enforcement ever in the past.
No. And he was very smart. I mean, he was able to put these together and wire them in such a way where obviously he wasn't going to injure himself, wasn't afraid of going off.
His parents could give you no indication of any behaviors that after the fact.
Just that when he got.
See it with your child.
Yeah.
After.
Just that he was, I wouldn't say antisocial, but he was kind of reclusive as he got into his older teens, you know, later years.
Which is not at all unusual for teenage boys. I raised several of them, and I know antisocial is, if they're social.
Yeah, I mean, he just wasn't very forthcoming, and like I said, we don't know because his parents were religious. That's why he wore that T-shirt that I think it had the name of a church on it with a kid on a swing. You know, is there some deeper meaning to that? You know, I always kind of wonder. And then he sent one to a pastor that his mom liked on Facebook. Again, that was the only connection that we could find between those two. But he was trying to terrorize the city, which he did. Yeah, thankfully, in the end, we got it done. We did have two that were killed. Esme was severely injured. The other two are recovering. But thankfully, we didn't have any others.
Can you talk a little bit about the coordination between APD and the FBI and ATF? Just sort of, were there like daily meetings or something where you swapped information and had updates, or just anything you can talk about in terms of that coordination? Because it had to be must have been a big deal.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was on a grand scale, unlike anything that I had been involved with before. So I showed you the command post that we had, that double wide trailer, and that's what we were using early on, especially when we came up to the Galindo in the third scene. But after that, we moved out to CTEC, which is the APD Communications Center, where they have 911, and APD, Travis County are all out there. So it was a larger area, and we had meetings upon me. We had meetings for meetings. Like we'd meet several times a day, sit down and have everybody kind of brainstorm and say, okay, this is where we're at. Because we had groups that are working on researching particular individuals. So they'd come back and kind of give us feedback with what they gathered, whether they thought it was going to be significant or not. So we brainstormed every single day throughout the course of those 19 days. We met multiple times. And it was in this particular one, it was a good working relationship. You kind of always worry when you go into this because you've got agencies that overlap in jurisdiction, and just by nature, we're not always into sharing information with other agencies. And there were times where we had to kind of overcome that because there may be something that one agency had some information that they were holding tight to the vest. But the heads, I told you earlier, Christopher Combs and Milanovich and Brian Manley all got together. And I think between the three of them, we're able to really stress everybody needs to be on the same page. We all need to know what's going on in order to bring this to a successful conclusion. So it worked out. It worked out particularly well in this case. I've heard about other instances where it has not, just because you've got, I guess for lack of better words, you got so many different egos involved. Everybody out there had a jacket that had some, acronym on it. Yeah. But the guys in this case were great. There's a few episodes that are out there now. There's one that the FBI did. I think might have been on Dateline, 19 Days of Terror. I did one not long ago for ID Discovery called See No Evil on the serial bomber case. So there's some literature out there, but you can see I just posted all the badges and logos for several of the agencies, and not just us, but since he lived in Pflugerville, we incorporated the Pflugerville Police Department, Cedar Park Police Department, shirts, Travis County District Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was kind of our lead on putting together all the legal documents with regards to the pen traps and the search warrants. So it was very, 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 very involved. But again, knock on wood, it came together. It was good.
Yeah.
Case, it was a good working relationship.
It's a great teamwork. Did you say one of the Bearcats came from Williamson County?
Williamson County. So we had one at APD, and Williamson County was bringing theirs. And what we were going to do is have them meet up and pin him in, but he started moving before either one of them could get there.
Right by the Round Rock Police Department.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
not that far.
No.
Yeah. So I don't think Round Rock had a Bearcat. I think it was Williamson County Sheriff's Office that was bringing theirs. And that's what we were counting on. And as soon as he started moving, it's like, okay, plan B, you're just going to have to switch on the fly. And we had the two SWAT bands. And as they're following him, they knew that he was getting close to the interstate. And I remember listening on the radio, the commander over SWAT making the decision that they needed to ram him, conduct a vehicle assault, not allow him on the interstate. Because if he got into a high-speed pursuit, that could have gone on for hours. And who's telling who else would have been hurt on that? So they made that decision within just that couple of minutes of that video to take him down. But like I said, it worked out because they initially planned to go up to the driver's side, and if they had, we would have lost officers. No doubt about it. Had officers killed. Yeah. Yeah. So it's pretty fascinating. It's tragic. Thankfully, this type of thing doesn't happen every day. I know every once in a while we'll get called out. There's a bomb scare out at the airport, but we've never had anything again happen on this scale. And we learned a lot from it too, on how to communicate with the other agencies and how to set up this command post early on. And there's different languages now that we as law enforcement officers are going through so that we can communicate with one each other. And I'll just give you an example. So just recently with the Attorney General's office, I went through, it's called an alert training, advanced law enforcement, rapid response training, where we go in and clear schools, like in the Uvalde incident, where the kids were all killed. To prevent something like that from ever happening again, the Texas legislature mandate that every single police officer in the state of Texas go through this training. And so now we've learned how to compile these teams. I just went through it a couple of weeks ago, where we can go in and we can do a rapid response if we've got an active shooter in the school. And we did different scenarios. So I put my vest on and we actually used simunitions, and we had an active shooter in the school, and I had to go in individually and take out the shooter. And then we went in as teams, went 2-person teams, 3-person teams, 4-person teams. And the logo and the language that we use is consistent with every officer in the state of Texas. So if I get called out to Round Rock High School and this goes on, and then I've got officers from another agency that are arriving on scene, we know the same terminology and how to put these teams together, and they operate all the same way.
That's great.
Build upon scenarios like this, So we sat down and we debriefed after this, and we said, this is something we wish we'd have done earlier on, putting the command post together, so that we can do that in the future and not have to reinvent the wheel every single time we have a major incident. So we learned quite a bit. I think every single one of the agencies involved in this case were able to take something positive away from it. And if it were to happen again, I think we'd be even that much more efficient in the future.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I just have to say 2 things. This is one of the most interesting talks like this I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And 2, you guys did an amazing job.
I appreciate
getting
that.
this together so quickly.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I told you, I mentioned that the 20th, the day that we identified him as a bomber, but we didn't know where he was at, was our daughter's 16th birthday. She'll forevermore remember that. So later on, I ended up receiving a medal for the work that we did in this case, and I ended up giving it to her as a belated birthday. So
that's nice.
The medal that I ended up getting as a result of this.
That's nice.
Now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was heartbreaking to see the families go through this, and I feel for Condon's family too. I couldn't even imagine. And they put out a very nice statement, indicating that their hearts were with those that were affected by their son's deeds. And they have to live with that for forevermore.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Did he have siblings?
Yeah, sister. I know that he had a sister. She was receiving those texts from them.
And did the parents choose to stay in that house? I mean, now the whole world knows who you are and what your son did. And
yeah. So he was living at a different house when we took him down. But as far as I know, they own that house. But yeah, it's out there. I mean, I showed you the cameras. When I rolled up to the house, I was just blown away that all the news media, I mean, not just local news, but there were like some national news out there. They were already camped up across the street before we even went in to notify them. And I guess at that point they knew it was going to be their son was going to be involved. But they very, very cooperative. I mean, they didn't hold anything back. They answered every single one of our questions. They gave us unfettered access to the entire house. We went through, searched his bedroom, searched the storage units out back. I mean, anything we knew we needed, his family made sure that we had it. So they're very, very cooperative. They definitely did not try to hide anything from us. But yeah, they said they watched the news just like everybody else. Imagine, why would somebody do something like this and end up being their own child? Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much. That was a fantastic presentation. And I know I speak for everybody by saying really appreciate you coming out and meeting with us, and just excellent work. And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So I agree with Sherry, y'all did such a fantastic job of solving this crime, so rapidly. Are there any cases now that you have retired from APD that you would like to have, that weren't solved, but you think there's a chance of them getting solved?
Everyone.
Every one
Well,
of them?
and I say everyone. So when I was at the Austin Police Department, I was in homicide for almost 20 years, 19 and a half years. I assisted with over 700 homicides, and I had 68 as lead investigator. When I retired, there were 4 out of that 68 that I was not able to solve. Now, I don't believe there's any such thing as a perfect crime.
Right.
And I believe that those will be solved at some point. And I'm hopeful that those families will get the justice that they deserve. Whether it be somebody that has information, gets hemmed up on another charge, and are willing to use that information to try to make a deal. But I'm very hopeful that at some point, they will be able to, those 4. And out of those 4, there's 2, we've got pretty good suspects. We just weren't able to make that definitive link, at least not yet.
Like enough of a link to take it to a district attorney and have them be willing to prosecute, or?
Not to that point yet.
Okay.
But we have very circumstantial, like somebody we highly suspected of being involved. We've got them on video
Okay.
in the general area around the approximate time, but nothing to say, in fact, that they are the ones that had committed the murder. And in a lot of these cases, too, when they are ready to take them to trial, they want something that's going to be solid, So I think in those 2 suspects are good for it. We just got those cases have to be made.
Do you think we'll ever know the answers to the yogurt shop murder? Or do you think that
I
we'll
read
know
the yogurt
answers?
So I read the yogurt shop case because when I was in homicide, that occurred early 90s.
Yeah.
I started in homicide in 2003, but we still had the physical case file in the closet.
Yeah.
Homicide case. So I dug it out. And I went through and I read all the confessions in those cases. And I am of the firm belief that the guys that they did arrest are good for it. The issue they have is that there is an unknown source of DNA on the thigh of one of the girls.
Okay.
So Richard Faithful was in homicide at that particular time. And they went back, and I think that they contacted every single person that potentially could have had contact with the victims back then and got DNA, probably 80 plus DNA standards that they compared. The problem was that when they went in there, the place had been set on fire, and the fire went in there and they hosed the place down. The girls were in water, lacking clothing. So who knows where it potentially could have
A random person in the
from.
Yeah.
And even the transport thing, I mean, DNA,
Right.
still, we're still kind of in our infancy.
Yeah.
I mean, DNA was known, but not like today.
But you believe that those are the people that we can think of in our minds as being responsible?
I believe so. Yeah. And one of them was later involved. I can get all the technicalities of why they ended up being released. One of them later being involved in an also involved shooting, was shot and killed. I don't know what the circumstances were on the 3rd. It's been a long time. But I read the confessions and statements that were made back then. Yeah, I think I got that.
Okay.
I think they're the right guys. I know Jim Jones was a sergeant at APD at one point. I know that he doesn't think so. He seems to think that they had been wrongfully charged.
Okay.
Yeah. From what I read, I think that they found the right guys. Just that one is just kind of that question mark that's thrown everything else into a loop. But there's quite a bit. You can get online and research about it too.
Yeah.
All the ins and outs. I think there's been several different shows done on it.
Yeah.
On that one.
I have a personal question. How do you not become incredibly consumed by the case? I mean, you see the worst of human behavior and you see the horror and you see the result, and you know that you're very close to discovering the perpetrator. How do you just leave that at the office and then go home and celebrate a birthday, or go home and have dinner with the kids? That must be an awfully tough thing to do.
Yeah, so that's obviously that's easier said than done. So when you work in homicide, it does consume you pretty much 24/7. I mean, I think about murder mayhem all the time. And my wife throughout the years too could probably tell you about all my cases forwards and backwards too, because she knows. I think for me, when I go in there and I'm working these cases and I've got a deceased, I've got a victim that's been killed, I try not to focus on that as being an individual that's just breathing, speaking, eating just moments beforehand. I look at it as more of a kind of cliche, a body of evidence. I look at that person, I'm trying to determine what type of evidence can I glean from that body. Is there the potential for foreign DNA underneath the fingertips? Is there potential latent prints that could be on the hands or the ankles if it's a secondary dump site where this person was moved? So I try to focus more on the actual evidence. Now, that's tough to do when you have kids involved. You get children, because adults, a lot of the circumstances we work, they place themselves in risky behaviors. Drugs or prostitution or gangs or something like that. But with the kids, you're dealing with really the true innocence. And those are times are hard to come to grips with. But I try to just stay focused on the task at hand. Am I always able to do that? No. I can tell you I was lead investigator when Senior Officer Jaime Padron was shot and killed in the line of duty at the Walmart at Parmer and I-35 back in April of 2012. And I responded to that scene, and Jaime was laid out there in the Walmart. He'd been shot in the throat by Brandon Daniel, and seeing him in the same uniform that I wore, as an Austin police officer, that was tough. And when I got back to the office, I'm sitting down, I did my interrogation, and I'm writing up my arrest warrant, and my window actually overlooked the flagpoles out in front of APD headquarters, and I could see people bringing up candles and teddy bears and stuff and place them at the base of the flagpole. And I remember I just kind of had to shut my blinds, just try to shut out the rest of the world and just stay focused on what I needed to do at that particular moment in time. And it's not always easy. There are times I think about cases. I don't tell you to have to go see your therapist after we leave here today, but I'll give you an example. I had one where it was a 65-year-old grandfather babysitting his 2-year-old granddaughter for the day. And he was in the process of mowing the backyard. He had a riding lawnmower and put her on his lap, made a couple passes around the backyard, and then he went and put her on the stoop with some lemonade or some tea or something while he finished mowing the yard. And as he made another pass, she wanted to get on, and she darted out in front of him on the riding lawnmower, and he couldn't stop it, and it rode over top of her, and it chopped her up, and he had to flip the lawnmower over, and he cried. I mean, just cried like a baby, and there was nothing I could do to console that guy. And cases like that, yeah, I think about wondering how they're doing today, and how they've had to come to grips with that. And I just try to do the best that I can to be compassionate, be consoling when I can, and do my very best to see that, in these cases where there is a victim, that these families get the justice they deserve. And I can tell you, through the course of nearly 20 years, I have families that still reach out to me on anniversaries of the death, anniversaries of birthdays. They'll bring us cookies, they'll bring us cakes, to show us their appreciation for, what we did for them back then. So we can't always change the circumstances of what happened to them, but we can try to at least bring them that. And I think that's probably the most rewarding thing for me, is to be able to tell the family, that we've identified, we captured this individual that was responsible, and see that they get that justice.
Thank you for your work and that very deep explanation. And it's really important work. And thank you for helping keeping us safe.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
It's always nice to know you're on the case.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I know. Now in retirement, yeah, this is probably more stressed now than I ever cases are, yeah, very, very involved. You definitely have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's.
Yeah.
But we're getting the job done.
Yeah.
So I'd be more than happy, as I told you before, and you've got other topics that I can be helpful on. Please don't ever hesitate. I enjoy coming out here and speaking. And feedback's good. And
we'll take you up on that, David. You can rest assured.
All right. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
You want to shut that down? You got it?